Well, with more on this visit, we're now joined by the British High Commissioner to Canada, Robert Tinline. Excellency, thank you for making the time.
It's good to be here.
So, I want to begin with the discussions between our two prime ministers, because back in June, the two, both Prime Minister Starmer and Carney, struck up a working group to try to figure out a way for the trading relationship between our two countries to get closer. So, given the time that has passed since June, can we expect something concrete, like perhaps a memorandum of understanding with this visit?
So look, you're right. My Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, when he was here in June, agreed a joint statement with Mark Carney, and it covered a whole range of issues, trade absolutely at the heart of that. We've got a really strong trading relationship, an investment relationship, and what me and my team spend our time doing is trying to make those links between companies both ways. And alongside that, we want to try and make sure the barriers, the structures underpinning that relationship are as good as they can be. We've got a free trade agreement, the Comprehensive Progressive Trans-Pacific Partnership, the CPTPP trade deal has just been introduced. The ratification of UK membership has just been introduced to the Canadian Parliament, and we're really happy that that is now beginning the parliamentary process. And you're right, the Prime Minister's then said, let's set up a working group to really think about how we can go further. They put 6 months on that, so they said they wanted to report back to them in December, and we will report back to them in December. We're obviously only 3 months in, so for the moment, I wouldn't expect an update going to the Prime Ministers at this meeting. We'll come to that in December once the officials have had time to do their work and see where the Prime Ministers want us to take it.
Okay, so a few months' time still. Although, when we think about the trading relationship between our two countries and acknowledging that the vast majority of goods are already traded tariff-free, there are still sticking points. Cheese, beef, origins of products and the classification of that. Will we go back to those talks, do you think? Is there a desire to go back to those talks from the British point of view?
So there is a desire to break down as many rules as we can, but clearly the UK and Canada both have their interests, the things they want to protect, and where they want to go further. So that's what we're doing with that working group. We're talking between the Canadian officials, the British officials. Okay, what can we agree on? Let's go further on where we can agree. There may still be areas where we don't agree. Well, okay. And so that's what we're doing. But it's not. If you look at what the Prime Minister said in June, a lot of this is trying to look at the sort of emerging economy, the digital economy. How can we develop rules, develop the relationship between our two countries, really to take advantage of all of that, as well as the things that you say that we, as you say, we have disagreed on in the past.
We have disagreed on the past. But, I do wonder, though, where you take it even further, because you talk about the rules. And yes, we right now have a trade relationship. We have historic ties. We have common values. And yet, when you look at the actual volume our two countries trade, it's still very small. If I have the numbers correct, I think less than 4% of Canadian exports went to the UK. Less than 2% of British exports came here to Canada. Why do you think we are not taking better advantage of the trade relationship that is already available to the two countries?
So look, part of the job of me and my team is to try and raise those numbers. Obviously, my interest is in investment in the UK and British exports to Canada, but that's a two-way thing, and you have the Canadian government doing the same for Canadian companies. So look, but if you look at the investment side, there's tens of billions of pounds going both ways, supporting huge numbers of jobs on both sides. Most of the UK economy is in services; it isn't in goods exports. That's the fundamentals of our economy. And so, just looking at the goods export figures don't necessarily give a picture of the big breadth of the relationship that's there. That is incredibly important. However, we want those numbers to go higher. Of course we do.
Is there an interest, given that Mr. Carney keeps talking about these national projects that will serve as a catalytic impetus for investment? Do you sense that there is excitement or at least interest in the UK in investing here in Canada?
So look, investors. I talk to investors trying to attract them to invest in the UK. So it's a competitive space, right? And in the end, it's about the government, the project, trying to give the investors the return. Of course, there's investors in the UK looking at where they can get the return. They're always looking for where they can get the return, similar to Canadian investors as they look around the world. So it'll come down to the nature of the project, the nature of the return that investors think they can get. But of course, the Canadian funds look to the UK as well as other countries. The UK looks to Canada as well as other countries. But it's all about the project and where you can get that return. That's what drives the investment decisions that we see.
Mm-hmm. Now, quickly running out of time, but I do want to touch on a couple of other points. One of which you and I have talked about, behind closed doors, because back in the spring, when Prime Minister Starmer was in the United States in the White House, he was asked about Canadian sovereignty. He did not speak out in favor of Canadian sovereignty. He did not defend it, and many Canadians were upset by that. He did try to make up with a statement in June saying that we are an important player in the Commonwealth. How does Prime Minister Starmer view Canada?
So look, you'll see the pictures today with the Prime Minister of the UK and the Prime Minister of Canada working really, really closely together on our shared priorities, putting that relationship, at an incredibly high level. It's the second visit from Mark Carney to the UK this year. Keir Starmer took the time to come through Ottawa on the way to the G7 summit in June. That's 3 substantive bilateral meetings that they've had, as well as any number of other phone calls and multilateral meetings through the year. Right? This is a key, important relationship that there is a new energy in it. You've got 2 prime ministers with new mandates. And there is a real energy, as you saw in June, about what we can do together, whether that's bilaterally on trade and investment and other issues, or whether it's the UK and Canada and the world, as you saw on Ukraine, acting together on recognition of a Palestinian state and other issues.
Mm-hmm. Quickly, again, losing time here, I do want to talk about defence, though, because you talk about Canada and the UK in the world. You also talk a bit about Ukraine. And our 2 countries are trying to figure out how to work closer together vis-a-vis the military. How would the UK like to see that work out with Canada?
So look, only this week I had all of our exchange and liaison officers from across Canada in the High Commission for an annual meeting where we talk to them with you. We have dozens and dozens of British military personnel serving in the Canadian forces across Canada. Canada has exactly the same in the UK. These are incredibly tight links that we already have, but of course we want to do more on it. When I was out in Halifax earlier in the year, I saw the new Canadian destroyers. That's where you're going to build the destroyers. You're going to do it with a British, building on the British design, so that you can get them quicker, cheaper, but built in Canadian yards with Canadian jobs and with Canadian skills. It's a fantastic example of that partnership coming together to say, look, there are things that we can do better together, and we'll see more of that, I'm sure, in the coming years.
Guaranteed we're going to see more of that coming down?
I'm confident that we will do more on defence. The defence relationship is only going to grow. Look, Canada is increasing its spend on defence. We're increasing our spend on defence. We are only going to be doing more. It won't just be the UK and Canada, of course. We're part of NATO. We're part of a broader group of nations. But as we all step up on defence and do more on defence, we're going to need to do that together. And so I'm confident that we will see more of that as we go forward.
Robert Tinline, Excellency, thank you for the time.
Thank you very much. Great to be here.